This is a great, absolutely fabulous way to talk about hosting.
It is.
We could not have planned this better.
It's true.
It is like we couldn't have planned a better hello everyone.
It's like we pulled someone in to do this for us. Okay, so Sarah, I'm gonna.
These are all actors.
Right, this is fake. Sarah, I'm gonna leave that with you and I'll explain a little bit later what just happened once we get going. Okay, we'll circle back to.
Mark, is there a way to remove people from chat, like the messages in the chat, or no?
No, folks who are just logging in now won't see any chat prior to the moment they arrive.
Oh, great. Okay, that's good.
And so those of us that are in the room get to enjoy this beautiful moment together with penises and expletives, which is it's beautiful. That's why we're here. So I'll tell a brief story. I'm going to let you people, can you manage the wait room from there?
Yeah, I'm just going to bring up the guest list and kind of.
Okay. These look like real names, and I'm assuming these are real people, so we can let these folks in who are waiting. I have a colleague, so we're going to get started in a second, and Laura will introduce me, but I'll just briefly explain to those of you who are early. I have a colleague who does who produces a large event elsewhere, similar to what I do here in Vancouver, and being unprepared and not having a co-host during an event with a moment like this led to sheer panic without a backup plan or the awareness of how to remove and report people. And they ended up canceling an event right in the middle of the performance with 300 people, and it ruined the entire experience. There's no need to do that. You can control and react, but you can imagine if you were an artist and this happened to you right now, the sinking feeling and the feeling of panic that would have happened. So anyway, Laura, do you want to kick us off?
I will. Let's do this. Sarah, are you okay to moderate while I'm doing this?
Yeah, I'm just kind of letting people in as fast as I can here.
Okay, thank you. So welcome to the Moderator webinar. My name is Laura Simpson. I am the CEO and co-founder of Side Door. And just a little background on Side Door. Side Door began as a platform to help artists find spaces to play, usually alternate spaces to play, not your usual music venue. So our job was to create an active, democratic, fair, transparent marketplace where people could find real life shows and be hosted by anything from a homeowner to a private business. And then, of course, when COVID-19 hit, we were faced with the challenge of not being able to do in real life shows. So it took us about a week, but because we've been already working as a remote team, we've used Zoom quite a bit. And so Dan Mangan, my co-founder, did his first show on March 21st. And that was the beginning of a completely different story for us and how we were going to evolve and adapt to this time. And so online shows have become a thing. And in our world, it was very important for them to be engaging, which meant that the audience was a participant. And it also meant that the artist was able to earn a living. So we were necessarily going to ticket these shows. You can do free shows on Side Door, but we encourage them to be ticketed, or at least RSVP'd, so that the people come and show up just like you did today to enjoy the event. So one thing that we have learned in this journey, which isn't only started just recently, is that we value when there's somebody who's not the artist who's helping the artist run the show. And that was true before when we had a host, and that is true now when we are doing online shows. And so our guest today, Mark Busse, is the one who really took that transition to heart and dove right in with us. He went from hosting events at his private business for guests and colleagues there, and dove right into hosting and moderating the shows for Dan on his weekly events, and took all of his skills in background in design, facilitation, strategy, and all that stuff that he does in his regular work, and applied it to the idea of how can you support an artist in an online show. So welcome, Mark. It's really great to see you and be with you online. And so we're just going to do some Q&A after the fact, but I'll ask, this is a bit like a fireside chat, just a conversation that we're gonna have before. And just one more housekeeping element. Sarah Jamer, who's our marketing manager at Side Door, is also here. She has Side Door in parentheses on her name. And she's going to be moderating. She's going to be helping moderating the chat, and she'll call to our attention any questions during our discussion that you may want to ask, that we can be interrupted and answer for you. But we will do a full Q&A at the end of this. So thanks for being here, Mark. Welcome.
My pleasure. Before we dive into question one, should we let the recent comers know what just happened? It's a
sure.
It's a curious bit of framing, I think, for what we're going to talk about.
It's true. I mean, I think one of the things that we were challenged by when we first started doing shows, and we don't do shows just with Zoom, but it was one platform that we thought was very good because of this. I can put it on gallery view if you haven't done that already, and I can see many of you, and I can chat with you, and there's interaction. The other problem with that is that sometimes security is breached. So that's what just happened when we first turned on the show today. It's only the second time that I know of that it's happened.
I've had folks I've had to talk to, not quite to that extent. So for those of you who just arrived, when screen sharing is on, which we had chosen to enable for the first moments, so that we could share an image with some music as sort of the pre-show, holding thing. There is a feature called annotation or annotate. It's actually great fun. It's very engaging. It's a fabulous way for participants to draw and interact and all in real time over whatever someone else is screen sharing. You can imagine it being a very collaborative thing. Well, we just had someone draw some lovely male body parts in a beautiful red penmanship style with some action shots, let's just say, and then entertain us when we shut that down with some disrespectful chat contributions, shall we say. And so before we've even gotten into this webinar and the content and the purpose of today, there you go. That's why you need the answer to the question, do you need to have a co-host? Abso-freaking-lutely. to understand the platform, and it doesn't need to be scary. That was actually a brilliant way for us to start, actually. So yay, team. There you go. I hope none of us ever have to deal with that again.
No, and it is like we actually before this talked about starting a show with a bit of magic. That wasn't the magic.
It was like we couldn't have planned it better, right?
But it does demonstrate the need for someone to help you out on a show and keep things chill when things go a little awry. So let's jump right in, Mark. And actually, sorry, just before I start, we have about 69 participants here. I wanted to get a sense, if you can raise your hand, actually raise your hand, or you can use the raise hand emoji. How many folks have done this before or something like this before? Yes. Okay. Good. I'm just going to scroll through. Keep your hands up. Okay, great. Cool. Awesome. I just want to know sort of the level of experience we have of folks we're talking to. So, Mark, the first question here is, what is the role of a co-host / moderator?
Right. Fabulous question. We could do an hour and a half just on that. So it depends. It's like, how much does a car cost, right? It depends, I guess, on the type of show, the intentions of the artist or the organization hosting the performance. It depends on the complexity of the show, the plan for the performance itself. and the values and the vision and the kind of the objectives of whomever you're working in solidarity with to serve. I've played the role of curator. I've played the role of full-on producer. I've played the role of promoter, MC, interviewer. All of these roles can be part of the co-host moderator role, in the sense that I'm never the artist. I'm not the content necessarily. For Dan, some of you anyway have probably seen Dan's shows. I play a very quiet role. I mean, he brings me up all the time, which he should stop, but really I'm just there primarily to help make sure that the theme we agreed to and the plan that emerged from that and the technology and the conversations that ensue, because that's part of what he wants to do with his shows, happen without him needing to, you can imagine how difficult it is to be a performer and an artist and pour yourself into the world in a genuine way anyway, at the best of times. And so really to help lower the anxiety and facilitate the best possible performance in the context of this not quite perfect platform that we've chosen is sort of how I view the role. I mean, it can be complicated. The role, it doesn't need to be, and it does not need to be scary, but really it's just about understanding clarity around the intentions, helping provide some of the planning. And a lot of artists don't want to plan a show. They have a set list. They want to play the set list. What are you talking about? So this is new for them. They come legitimately from a place where they've been performing on stages for many years, and they have a way of doing that. And they are very, very capable of producing magic through that medium and with that relationship with audiences. And so that's not my role. But I will say that there was a recent talk by the wonderful author Priya Parker, whose book, that's my dog, whose book, The Art of Gathering, is a must read if you're interested in hosting and learning about facilitating and hosting gatherings that matter. She talks about the role of the co-host or the host or the facilitator as someone who holds space for the dialogue or the connections and the community building aspects despite obstacles. And I think as I view the world and the moment we're in and this rapid move to online everything, this is an obstacle. So my role is to help artists. I'm a big fan of the arts and culture and community. I'm desperately trying to find ways to use my own privilege and influence and power to help them succeed and thrive in this difficult time. And that obstacle has been described by some as, one fancy phrase I heard was social skeuomorphism. Skeuomorphism is when something that artificial or digital or man-made is meant to replicate something in real life, right? Like the trash can on your computer is not really a trash can, but it functions conceptually like that. And the current reality around social gatherings is that we've sort of started swapping out digital spaces and experiences, in this case, live music performances, which if not done skillfully, with some intention, can leave people actually feeling more disconnected and isolated than before. So, to go beyond that part of my answer, and for me, my personal motivation to do this work in terms of the role of the co-host is really to think beyond the kind of traditions and habits around what a live music show is or was or could be, and work with an artist to conceive of a new way of presenting that medium and their art. I'm happy to be the absolutely invisible, quiet person behind the scenes, just making things run okay and make sure we don't have, Zoom bombers hijack chat or screen share. But the reality is, the world does not need more gatherings. We certainly don't need more virtual online shows. We don't. We need better ones, desperately. So the entire right, the entire process for me is really about serving the artists and finding ways to do that so that we can provide better experiences.
Yeah, and I think, you know, our future state of Side Door includes, you know, being able to tell people when a show does have a co-host or a moderator, and tell people when there is certain elements of a show that are taken care of, so that, you know, they can then choose shows that are run that way. And I think because you're going to start to understand that the quality is affected when you do that, and it doesn't have to be somebody doing it professionally. So what are some good qualities of someone who may want to do this in this role in particular?
Kind of breaks into two camps in my mind. I think that the technical prowess, that's not, I want to encourage everybody watching to understand that there are definitely some things you need to know. Zoom's one of many platforms, and how to use them, set them up, and configure and manage them in real time does take some technical know-how. And for me, not all hosts will serve in this role, but for me, I also try my best to help performers sort out their computer, their internet, the video, the audio, like what's the mix of things that will produce the most reliably high quality performance. So those are absolutely good qualities. If you're kind of nerdy and you're kind of into this sort of thing, and you've used these platforms or have a desire to understand them more, I think that that's a great quality. However, I think anybody could serve in some capacity as a co-host or a moderator with rudimentary, as long as that technical stuff was handled, could be a participant in making sure shows are successful. I think humility, in the sense of never ever forgetting that this is not your show. Don't insert yourself. I've even done it occasionally where I'm like, I shouldn't have said a damn word there. This is not my show. This is Jill Barber's show, or this is Shari Ulrich's show. Get out of the experience. I think that that's a good quality. I think that there's also something to be said about being bold enough to know when you have to step in and say, hold on guys, time, technology, behavior, something has gone off the rails, and I don't want to be such a chill host, so, you know, in the shadows, that I don't help protect the integrity of the audience's experience by doing what I can do with the control that I have in that role, so that the artist doesn't have to worry about it. They're not watching the clock, they're playing music. And to that end, I think that many of our artists that I've worked with and the Side Door community have started to come to realize that music's only a part of what's going on here. It's about connection and conversation and emotions and dialogue. And you know, I have quite a bit of facilitation training and skills. And I think that that's a terrific quality. I think that knowing how to create space, understand compelling, how to you know, ask compelling questions, or manage the time really well, make room for all voices. These sort of things can really improve the experience of a performance, so that the music becomes even more special, because you're having a really crafted, carefully considered experience, where the music becomes more meaningful. But again, I'll conclude by saying to that, there is something about having the confidence and knowledge around the tools to know that if, you know, something goes off the rails, and we've had this, you know, the other day, Dan Mangan surprised me and said, Mark, can you handle things for a while? I really have to pee. And he vanished. And I was like, oh, okay. I have to host a conversation with this 700 people who are suddenly asking me questions, and I wasn't supposed to be part of this at all. So I think that is, you know, that's the reality. That could happen. It did to me.
That was great. You recovered from that moment quite well.
I just was like, Dad just went to the bathroom and left me alone. Anyway.
So Mark, how do you think people should become a co-host? Like, how do you think this can happen for people? If they're interested in doing this, how can they get into it?
I can think of my experience, but that goes back, a decade of really leaning into exploring and trying to find, and I think it's really no different, trying to find opportunities to practice the craft of hosting. It just happens to be now that I do it in a digital realm, so I'm trying to reconstruct ways of doing things that I did in the real world in a way that can bring some, because we've all been to so many Zoom meetings. We all are just sick to death of this thing in many ways. So how can we make it magical? I think that finding folks to shadow and to practice with and to mentor from, to be mentored by, is a really great approach. Now I'm going to get a whole bunch of emails, aren't I? Finding there are some really great there's some useful tools about facilitation and participatory process that I think would be beneficial for anyone who wants to augment the nerdy kind of, you can YouTube the learning around how do I use Zoom or tips for using Zoom. And we've Side Doors put together some terrific tutorials and tools on that sort of stuff. That's important. But find opportunities where you can ask folks to sit in, to observe, to participate, even as a co-host who does nothing but is going to post key messages in the chat window at certain points. That will bring some calm and some awareness and some familiarity with the process, and then start to layer in some of the other stuff and start designing. I can provide a pretty easy template for anybody to think about how to turn, the standard approach to format and the actions around, the labels we use to describe events, and reconceive of them by talking about why we actually gather and what we really want to get out of it. And that could change everything. And then you become a process designer, that's the fun part. That's the great. If you're interested in doing it, that's how you become a co-host. You find others who are doing that, and you start digging in.
And Jill Barber, thanks for being here. Jill mentioned in the chat here that you mentored her when she was going to do her first one, and acted sort of like as a silent partner on the show to sort of help guide her through, which I think is a great idea. If you have somebody who's done it before, to be also on that show with you and kind of walk you through as you're doing it on your first one, so it doesn't feel so scary. It's a great idea. Yeah,
does Jill want to pop into the conversation for a second and talk to that, or are we going to move on?
She's looking like she's okay with that. Yeah,
she's mortified. Is she mortified?
No, she's giving me a thumbs up here.
Okay. Oh, so shall I?
I was just going to say I can't unmute myself,
which
is also another essential role of the host.
Sure is.
Yeah, Mark graciously co-hosted 2 of my Side Door shows. It made all the difference. I only really wanted to do a Side Door show if I was going to have it moderated, because I've seen the difference between moderated shows and non-moderated shows.
Right.
And I agree with Mark. I think it's not essential. If you have 12 people at your Side Door show and you're pretty well versed on Zoom, I think you can handle it on your own. But I also think the more people that you have attending your Side Door show, the more essential it is to have somebody working behind the scenes to make sure that it all runs smoothly. And did you want me to speak to something in particular, Mark?
No, but speaking of behind the scenes, we see Grant behind you walking in and out of the scene. I hope he's not walking around in his underwear.
He probably is.
Probably.
So in this case, you could put my screen dark. You could all those things.
No, I think
so.
Did I miss anything in the idea of like the role or the characteristics and qualities of a good host? Is there anything else that we should mention to folks who are thinking about this?
You're obviously a natural host, and a lot of people are natural hosts. I think when it comes to these virtual online shows, this new world that we're all in, I think the technical know-how is really essential. For instance, I saw a great side door show the other day, but with about 600 people, but they didn't employ they didn't disallow participants from unmuting themselves.
Right.
That was just like it was just a little thing, but somebody that, like, unless you're a complete expert at Zoom,
yeah,
or I don't know. Anyway, like you mentioned having a template, and I think that if you had a really specific template for people that want to moderate or co-host, all the little switches, things that are essential, like that is an essential one to tick that box so that people can't be unmuting themselves in the middle of somebody's song, and so that people can't be screen sharing. Like I just think like a technical to-do list would be really helpful for moderators to even just go down that list and make sure that all of those boxes are checked, all those essential boxes. And then their personal hosting style, well, that will just depend on how they want to do it and what they've worked out with the artist. But I do think
there is the side door team, and I've sort of contributed to the content, has put together a really great short and long form version that's available on the website. If you decide to host as a curator or just interested, you can go down that path and find that PDF. It's got a lot of details about the setup, the preferences, the settings, the things to do to avoid, to make sure, that being a really important one. Screen sharing being another, knowing how to use the waiting room versus locking a show if you chose to do that, enabling or disabling chat. There's all kinds of technical things that you can use to protect the integrity of the experience. But yeah, for sure, yeah, Jill, you're right. It's the technical side is pretty key. I think it's doable though. It's not scary. It's something that anybody on this call, if you made it here today and you can participate in Zoom, you can be a co-host, and I can choose any of you want right now in the list, and I can make you co-host like that if you know how to enable that feature on in the settings in the first place.
Yeah, no, it's actually a perfect point. I mean, I know that all of us are learning as we go, and thanks for mentioning that we do have that document. Sarah just posted our online show tips there. It is a developing document. I will also mention that, and thanks, Jill, for coming in and sharing your experiences. I appreciate that. I also mentioned that, again, you don't have to choose Zoom to do your shows, but in a lot of ways, people have chosen it because it's sort of been easy for us to learn and get to know and figure out how to be interactive. It doesn't mean that Side Door is going to make you use Zoom or exclusively use Zoom, or that we won't find a better solution, but it's like what we're using for now. And what we're really striving for is, a selection of platforms that we have used and vetted and sort of understood and we can give education for, so that the user, the artist, the person who's creating the show can decide what is the right platform for me. Yeah. And what support do I need for that show? And so I'm actually just going to drop in the chat here now too. We also have a link that is for service providers. So if you want to be a co-host, a moderator, we are collecting this information for those folks to be found so we can matchmake with artists who are looking for those with that skill set. You'll also see a whole bunch of other service provider duties for mostly real life shows that you can select there that you are also doing. We've been collecting this list since 2017. It is something that we endeavor to basically enable to have its own profile, because at the end of the day, Side Door is a platform, it's a marketplace where you should be able to pull in all of the things that you need to create a show, whether it's online or in real life. So that's what we're trying to do here. So just to continue with the questions here, and yeah, we'll get back to some more questions from the audience as well. I want to ask you, Mark, is there we kind of touched on this here, but like, what is the way that you would suggest people just get their feet wet?
Host your own show. I would say the same question. I would go up a level and say, if we were back to normal, how would one become a side door host? Sign up, host a show. So if you have any artist friends in your life and they're struggling, and that struggle could be a myriad of things, lack of revenue and income, lack of opportunity, the yearning to perform for others, the disconnect with their fans, their audiences, and their craft, encourage them to sign up to Side Door, and then offer your services and do a small show. You can do a private show, and start playing with the platform, our platform, the digital platforms you use, because you can use Facebook Live if you want. It's a little harder to manage and less sort of interactive, but it works. You can also, by the way, in case you don't know this, you can in real time, I could, with a click of a button as host of today's show, I could initiate live streaming in real time to both YouTube Live, Facebook Live, and even custom streaming services right from inside of Zoom. If you chose to do that, of course, what you have to give some thought to, what are you charging for, and who gets to see it, and that sort of thing. But we've used it, teasers, part of a show, live stream, to build a bit of, oh my God, some FOMO, right? But I would just, find someone to serve. That is, make no mistake, the way I view my relationship with this part of my practice, this is service. So, I want to make sure that the artists that I love, Jill and Dan and many others that I'm working with, I want them to find audiences, and I want them to have successful performance experiences. And this is as good as we can figure out how to do it right now. So do that on a smaller scale, or bug me, I'll help you. Find someone like me to give you an opportunity to co-host and see how it's done.
Yeah, and I would just add some clarity in language as well on Side Door, because when you go to Side Door, you'll see you can sign up as a host, and that is in our world.
That's a real
that meant
host.
you had a space.
That's right. That's like I was a host. I had a venue.
Yeah.
Now I'm co-hosting, moderating, really.
So what we're working on is clarifying the language in our new world order to allow for a separate opportunity to define yourself as somebody who's more of a service provider, somebody who's going to do this. You may well be someone who is curating a show like a festival and also moderating a show like Mark does. You can be both.
Yeah, I've done
absolutely.
Both. Yeah.
I think it's just more about, you can do both. Yeah. And I've done both as the Syrup Factory, which is my promoter name. So I think it's really important to understand that there's a little bit of confusion around, the role of host on Side Door. So when you go to Side Door, if you do want to help, if you want to look for help to get a co-host, please just write to support if you're an artist, and we can help source those co-hosts that are made available to us, and they will soon just be available for you to find directly.
I haven't mentioned this before, Laura, but I've been thinking about an idea, and I don't want to add more complexity to your already incredible workload and to-do list, but it would be kind of an interesting thing if we as the Side Door community started to create a cohort of co-hosts, an army of folks that we can train to a certain level and mentor each other. And you know what I mean? If we had a cluster of these folks that we could loan out and pair up and encourage, that would be an interesting thing that I'd be all over supporting, if that's
I think, and it's one of the things that we've talked about as well, is like there's an online, like a virtual audio engineer now that you can hire. And there's all these really interesting roles popping up. And I think our job is to stay on top of are these essential roles? Are they making these shows better? How can you find them? How do we connect these people? How do we educate folks and provide best practices and that sort of thing? But at the end of the day, we are not the ones who are creating the shows. We're the ones who are helping you create the shows, and you do the work. And it brings me to a question here, Mark. I think some people are wondering, is this a job? Is this something that I can actually make money at doing?
Technically, yes. I have a complicated relationship with that question. So I work in design leadership and am in a career transition moment. And it's interesting because I just today got a text message from someone who's like, can you come join our team? It is very tempting to me in this current new, what did you call it, Laura? New world order. New World Order. This work is so rewarding and meaningful and feels important for society. And to me, not for everybody, but to me, that's a really big part of my values, and being in service of that is really important. And I have to tell you, I'm getting all kinds of offers for people to pay me to do this. And it's pretty easy math to figure out a way that I could probably earn a pretty decent income if I just did this full time. There's also other process design and facilitation work I can still do outside of this in the digital realm mostly. So yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure that this time next year, there will be people who will do nothing but be a concierge of high quality process design, hosting and facilitation, including technical support for beautifully bespoke, conceived performance arts and culture of all kinds. Not just, often when I refer to artists, or Laura and I talk about, we're talking about musicians and such, comedians, poets, all kinds of things can happen in the performance realm. We did one, I curated and hosted one not long ago with an Indigenous leader talking about a new relationship to reconciliation. Like, these things are performance-based in some ways too, right? Like, that's, people will pay to participate in these type of things. So yeah, I may never go back to work. This may be my new job. I don't know.
Oh, that's wonderful.
If Dan keeps throwing people at me, I may not have a choice.
You know, and there's a comment here from Adub who said he manages a record, I'm assuming gender story, managing a record studio and work in a record store, and that it could be used for hosting curators. And this is just one thing, a little bit of a tangent, but we have had so many great studios and venues step up to serve as the space that has the audio and technical abilities that you may not have at home.
Right.
And so they can actually be pulled in as like a physical venue, just like you would, you know, before COVID, and they can be cut in to the split automatically. So if there is a local space, you have a local space, or there is a local space, you know, you can absolutely just pull them into the show, and they can get a split of the ticket revenue if that's something that you've agreed upon, just to use the space and the technical abilities that they have. It's a
risking
huge
sounding repetitive and a little bit disrespectful. I have other friends, and I'm involved in a community of artists who are doing this stuff with real vigor, trying to figure it out. I'm sure this is just, I'm in Vancouver, I'm sure this place is all over where the community is rising up, trying to figure out ways to do this. But I have participated as an audience member in a couple of shows where local studios, I'm not going to name names, local studios have invested all kinds of time and money and technology and effort into the look of a show, and good God, they look good. But they were vapid, facile, unengaging. Halfway through, I turn it off. I'm like, yep, I can just put on a video and watch this. This is no, they're not talking to us. There's no connection. There was no heart in the experience. And I would much rather have a bit of glitchy video and maybe a phallus drawing on my screen share moment, and have people feel like they see each other, they're connected, they can touch each other's hearts, and have share a beautiful experience. And now we can do it around the world. Like, if an artist rents out a venue or is brought in to gig in a fairly big venue, only that kind of area can draw in that crowd. Whereas we're on shows, gosh, Jill, we had people from all over, didn't we? We had folks all over North America, Europe. Dan often has folks who are in, like, we were having a conversation with somebody who was telling us his incredible story of coming out and what a song of Dan's meant to him, coming out with his, coming out like with his sexual identity, or orientation rather. And it was a really emotional story. And he was in Argentina. And it was just like he was in the room next door. It was gorgeous. So yeah, I mean, anyway, we should be doing more of this.
I want to dig in a little bit to what you just said about, like how to, make this feel like it has heart. So can you dig into your process a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So I combine a number of frameworks that I've learned over the years. If you're interested and you want to learn, and I suggest that any single human being who wants to be a better version of themselves and a better host, a better show up and host other people in better ways. There's a community called the Art of Hosting. Google it and off you go. You can endless reading and learnings in that community, and I've traveled through other circles of these practitioners. There's beautiful common elements that we use to make sure that we truly understand why and how we approach gatherings. So any of the artists I've worked with, and some of them would probably say it's a little annoying at first, because I come at them with the question of, like, why are we doing this? What time is it? And they're like, what time is it? It's 1:30. What do you mean? No, what is going on in the world by your perception that there is a need that you can fill with what you're doing? I want to understand your motivations. That leads directly into some language that I usually capture for them and start a planning document around the purpose. You think about, I'll give you a super short story. I don't want to waste too much of our time here. Last year I turned 50 years old. I know you probably can't tell. I definitely look 30, don't I? No. And I don't do birthdays. I mean, I have my own private practice. I don't do birthday parties. And birthday parties is just a label, right? So in a conversation with my wife and friends who insisted that they wanted to do something because it was my big 5-0, I said, sure, okay, fine. Then, what I perceive as the need to mark that occasion is the lack of celebration and genuine, authentic expressions of love and understanding for each other at key moments in life, understanding that we could be run over by a bus tomorrow. And at the funeral, it's too late. So, the label birthday party or the label online show or live performance could be other things than birthday cakes, candles, balloons, what have you. This is a common example, by the way. But not so common was my approach last year was I held my own funeral, complete with casket, which I laid in. And the invitation, was the rules of the engagement were that friends and family who showed up were to eulogize me. And there was a station set up as though I were dead. Folks wrote things about me that made them crazy and made them love me and everything in between. And some were invited to share, and others wrote them on pieces of paper, rolled them up, and shoved them into an urn, which I now keep. And that was a very special version. And there were all kinds of other things, but I won't go into it. The point is, I start by meeting with the artist. I also want to understand the artist's intention. Like, what are their motivations? I've said no recently to somebody. They were purely doing it for money, and I wasn't interested. All they wanted was ticket sales. And I was, what else? No, just ticket sales. So I want to understand the purpose of the show. We have a conversation. I ask them about who their audience is. Describe them to me. Like, who do you want to be in the room? How will you frame the invitation and the promotions around the promise you'll make to what kind of experience this will be to attract the right people? Who do you not want there? What vibe do you want this to feel? Is this going to be performative? Is this going to be engaging? Are you going to have dialogue? Is it going to be fun? Is it serious? Are you a classical musician and it's going to be very that, I'm working on an online multi-day jazz festival in Vancouver. Stay tuned. Meeting with Corey Weeds and that crew. I don't know if they're online here today, but we're starting that process, and that will have a different vibe than Jill Barber sitting with her guitar in her living room. You see what I mean? So that starts to shape the principles based on their values and the outcomes of what this gathering can look like. Then we go into the complexity, like, how long will it be? Is there gonna be media? Is there media? Are we gonna have audience folks come into the conversation early, later? What kind of engagement? How interactive will it be? Some artists want to do, not many, but some will have wanted to do breakout rooms and use polls, which is a quick, I won't bother doing it for you today, but polling is, I could say, you know, which of this artist's albums would you like to hear next? And put a list up, and everybody on this call could vote in 1 second, and we'd have an instant poll. Super fun. There's lots of different tools we can use, but the tools are just tools. I start with, like, what do you want this to be? Why is this happening? What purpose underlines the motivation behind this thing? So then we have a meeting. I do it on Zoom. I explain to them what I heard. I share with them my planning document template, and we start framing a run of show loosely. Just what would it look like, and what if we're going to do 90 minutes, how this is going to break down. And we talk about the things we could do, and then we go deeper. We also, during that period, that process, that's when I will do, through screen sharing and some coaching, I will help them set up. Most of the time, the artists are the ones who are going to set up their Zoom account, right? I would rather I do it, to be honest, but hey, it's their show. So I have to go through and to turn that on, turn that off. Good God, turn that off. Like, enable that, disable that. It's a very robust platform. And once we're dialed in, then we know still what needs to happen is when they launch their show, they need to heave the transfer the hosting or co-hosting permissions onto me so that I can do my job. But we're getting the technical stuff out of the way. It's a bit of a hill to climb, and they're often nervous. All of the artists I've worked with so far are quite nervous. Like, whoa, I don't understand. I don't want this to screw up. And so I support them through that process. Then we often will talk about the invitation. I would call it the invitation. And so, okay, we're going to announce this. There's going to be an event page on Side Door. There's going to be you're going to post to your social media people. Maybe they have PR folks and managers, promoters helping them. What's the language of this promotion to attract the right folks, and make sure we don't overpromise and mislead in terms of what we're going to deliver. Recently, we've been really working the angle of, you know, what does this album mean to you? Tell us, and we may invite you into the conversation. The promise being we're going to have interactive engagement with the artist. Whoa! So there's all kinds of things that we then conceive of together. If that is the role that the artist wants me to play, if they have it all framed out. I have one. Folks I'm working with, they know exactly what they want. They don't want to deviate. They've constructed their own experience map, and it's quite clear for them. That's fine. Good. I'll still help you with the tech and all of that stuff. But when it gets complex, when they have videos to play and different instruments to switch between, and the other day we had a second musician sing with somebody, which was a lot of fun. But whoa, how do you do that? Through latency, you can't have two people in two locations on Zoom sync, and it won't sync up on Zoom. So they had to be kind of in the same room and work through some of those details. Once we have a plan, and some artists don't really like to plan too much, they just want to perform and feel the vibe. That's fine. My job is to plan. I always make a plan. And then I share that with them and make sure that they've had ample opportunity to have input, tweak, bend, adjust, express opinions on what the plan might be. And then we lock down that run of show, and I say, okay, so on the day, this is what we're going to follow. You know, print out a copy and have that with you, or at least understand what we're doing, and we're going to follow that. And leaving room for jumping off points and technical surprises and what have you. During that process, one of the things that's important, and I would encourage everybody to keep in mind, you have the chat window, and unlike Twitch, which is a great platform, but it's a very different kind of chat. You don't see people, and they're not having conversations germane to what's going on. It's often kind of flippant and fun. It's fun. It can be fun. Chat, if enabled during a performance, is a powerful way to continually, through a sort of drip notion, you can continually deliver key messaging. Jill's got a new album coming out. Follow Dan over here. Sherry's next performance is, here's a link. And that's my job. So I need to know what that language is going to be. What information do you want to be in that room? What announcements do you want to make? What do you want me to be able to control? When the day of the event happens, my process is to an hour to 30 minutes before the event, assuming we've done really robust tech checks and we know we're dialed in and video and light and audio and computer and internet and all of the things are playing nice together. We'll do a sound check anyway. We'll make sure, and I'll normally have them reboot their computer or reboot their modem maybe, and no apps going except for what we know, and get it dialed in. Then we get in there, we set up the Zoom room, we set up a pre-show, and holding people in a webinar waiting room until such time as if you were here early today, you would have seen there was an image and there was some music playing and that kind of process. And then we're off to the races. During the event, my job is to watch chat, to watch the participants. I see hands up. I see people waving, want my attention. I see questions coming in. There's private and public questions. It becomes very stressful. I'm often covered in sweat. I have to tell you, our job as hosts in that scenario, in service, is to take all that anxiety and stress and leave the performer completely relaxed so that they can just be beautiful. And so I try to do that. There's certain technical things I'll do during the show, renaming. You'll notice my name has asterisks before it. And I can do that for my other co-conspirators, collaborators, special guests, people I want to bring up, and I can quickly find them. I've added my city to my names. I'm in Vancouver. These are things I can do on the fly. There's lots of habits I've developed for these sort of things. And as we go, I help the audience orient themselves to the platform. Even today, probably some of you are not super familiar with Zoom. You may not have known that there's a speaker view and a gallery view. You may not know that there's a way to mute, unmute, and we've turned that off, and all of these sort of things. And I make sure that I have a bit of a dialogue with them so that the artist isn't the person who has to be the bad cop and explain the rules. I got the rules, I got it. And I'll kind of control that and enforce that lightly, and keep an eye on time as we go, engage the audience. There'll be questions coming in. Right now, I'm focusing on answering this question and telling this story for you, but normally I'd be looking carefully at chat. So if you're sending me private messages right now, don't. I can't pay attention to that. Send it to Laura or Sarah. They'll get it to me and make sure the question is asked. So I follow along the run of show. As we get to the end, often lately, there's kind of a couple of gifts that artists are giving audiences to conclude shows these days. I love both. One is like an open, unfiltered conversation, right? So I have to be that's when I'm really the moderator. I'm really making sure to avoid awkward, uncomfortable, or are asked many, many times questions, because artists get asked a lot of things. And this is where knowing the artist is also important. What do they want to avoid, or what do they really want to receive? And I find those people, I prioritize them. I'm talking to them quietly on the side. Okay, you're next. Are you up? Make sure your video's on. Okay, ready? Ready? Good. Boop, bang, and I spotlight them, and all of a sudden, and the artist is like, great. Hey, hello, Steve. What's your question? Hello, so-and-so, and just kind of, so at that point, I feel sometimes like, I don't know, like a DJ, or like a radio, like and next up, it's Sally from Victoria. Go ahead, Sally. So I play that role a little bit. It's helpful. Spotlighting videos, knowing when to turn spotlight off. Oh my God, that's embarrassing. You forget you've spotlighted someone and they're staring at themselves on the screen while someone else is talking. One of the important things I think that I maybe don't do a good enough job of, I want to mention as part of my practice and encourage everybody to do, is after the show's done, make sure that you have a good, honest conversation with that performer and ask them what they would have done differently, or what they appreciated, or maybe didn't. And that's not only a learning opportunity for you, but also for them as they think about how this process, this is early days, and this will evolve. I think once real life venues are back open again, I think we've permanently entered the era of the virtual show. So that's a bit of a flight. Does that, Laura, did I capture the basics, do you think?
Yeah, that's wonderful. And no, well, I mean, I think there's always room to miss something, but I think, Sarah and I and yourself, we collaborated on a document before this, just like you suggested. And that document now can become the thing that we share to all of you, so you can have notes, and we'll continue to evolve this as a best practices
Also,
document.
can I mention something around that? It's something that we also have to hold each other accountable for, Laura and Sarah and Dan and others. These platforms are changing. And so when we come up with best practices recommendations for folks, knowing that you can choose if it's appropriate and you've decided with the artist that unmuting the entire audience for applause at some point is something they want to do, which some love, some hate, some don't care. Recently, I haven't updated my Zoom platform yet, but if you updated your Zoom app in the last week, the unmute button has disappeared right now. They've said an announcement that actually it's going to come back, but due to some privacy issues, they made the unmute feature for hosts go away, and it's going to come back in the next iteration. So that's and the platforms will change, right? Things, and so we have to stay on top of this. Like, Zoom's got a lot of stuff planned as additions to the platform to make it more secure and more robust and better controls. And so we as the hosts need to know that, just like a musician needs to understand the software update to their digital audio platforms or something. So that's up to us.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it's it's a little volatile when you're not building everything from scratch, but it's impossible to build everything from scratch these days. And like, we weren't going to build a payment processor, we use Stripe. So that's the things that we do. For example, there's a question that came in while you're speaking, Mark, and thank you for that great answer, that asked, what is the difference between a host and a curator, first of all? And so to answer that, we're now moving in a direction that, so on Side Door, when it says host, those are venues. Those are people who have spaces. When we're talking about host, it in general, it can mean like you're co-hosting this event right now. I'm hosting a Zoom event. Mark is acting as a co-host. So host is used in, colloquially in that term, in that way. A curator, the way that we've been defining it and way that it has been defined, is somebody who's actively deciding who's going to be on the show and how it's going to be run. And they're basically the ones who are the tastemakers. They're the ones who are delivering the content and helping to organize that content.
And so in my world, sometimes the curator role and the host role are the same people.
Exactly.
And sometimes they're not. I'm doing a show for an artist in Atlanta, Canada, and it's being presented by a radio station. They're that personality, but there's a host character. But then I will be the producer, host, moderator. So you see, it gets a little bit convoluted. So it's spaces and curators is one kind of hosting, and this is another kind of hosting that we're talking about.
Yeah, and this follow-up question to that particular one was, how does the cash flow work with Side Door and those rules? And so currently you can have an artist and a host. So a host in this case, we've had people sign up who are curators sign up as hosts on Side Door. What we're moving towards, as I mentioned, is having more clarity around these roles as we are developing this online status. And we have venues, we have curators who may not have a space, but they are curating. And we also have service providers, and those people are ones, that they can provide lots of different services, but they're not a curator, they're not the artist, right, and they're not a host. So those roles are sort of starting to be more defined. And the way that Side Door works is that you can basically be pulled into an event, and if you have a profile, you can basically hook up your Stripe Connect account, your bank account, to the platform. And so the split that's decided on what you're getting paid will be paid directly to your account. Side Door does not take that in. It is basically split from the point of purchase and then dropped into your account after the show. And that's negotiated with you and the artist. And that's how that breaks down. So in the future, when we have all these profiles, that's how we envision it working, is that whoever is pulled into the show will be paid directly from that pot of money. so that that money's safe and secure and then deposited directly to where it needs to go. No more writing settlement sheets on the backs of napkins. That's no. So I'm just going to get into a couple more questions, and then I want
Sure.
to make sure that Sarah, did I miss any more questions while?
One just came in, and then I have a couple to flag to Mark. But one that came in that Laura, you might be suited for is somebody's thinking about their performance series and how might we have a small live audience and live stream the performance at the same time. Can you comment on how that might work and pros and cons?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if Dan's here, but that's something Dan and I've been talking about quite a bit, and it absolutely is. I think you're right, Mark. I think this is the future. We're going to see lots of shows that are having a live audience, a small live audience that are safely there, but also have a streaming version of that as well. And I think it's important as we go into that to think about the role of the moderator, the co-host, because what you're doing is you're holding two spaces at once, which can be very difficult, and you don't want either audience to feel like they're not being spoken to or performed for.
Dan, do you have any thoughts you want to add to this?
Just that, like, as you said earlier, like, this is not going away, and there's going to be like this really long, uncertain gray period where we're not back to 80,000 people at Bonnaroo, but we're also, starting to gather in certain ways. And I think that a lot of these venues are dying to open, like real venues, or even DIY venues and spaces. They're dying to open. They want to open, but because of all the regulation and COVID stuff, they can't do it at full capacity. So they're going to be opening at like 30% capacity. But they can't survive on the alcohol sales of a 30% capacity. These venues are basically, their business model is to be full. And so
unless you have a 5-drink minimum.
That's right. And so I think what we're going to start seeing is like 2 ticket tiers, right? Where it's like, okay, guys, you can come and be here. We're only selling 40 tickets to this place that holds 200. And so that we can all be distant. And then there's some interaction, there's some real life performance. And then now that we've spent the last 8 months doing online shows, and we've all invested in special cameras and nice lighting and, Ethernet cables so that we have good internet speed. And now a lot of these venues are going to start having to beef up that side of it, that production. And then we're going to start seeing like, okay, it's $5 to watch it from home and it's $35 to be there. And, the cool thing about that is that beyond the venue space, capacity is much less of an issue. So in theory, you can sell, 1,000 tickets, or if you don't use Zoom and you're using YouTube and you're just streaming it or something, you could sell 10,000 tickets if the band's popular. And now you have an opportunity for everyone to kind of make a living and to continue to thrive off of this interesting, like, sort of hybrid model. And I think that that's going to become very, very common.
Yeah, and I'm seeing a couple of questions. Thanks, Dan, for that. I'm seeing a couple of questions that are coming in for Mark that I think are relevant, and I think it's 6 o'clock now in my time, and whatever it is your time.
Only 2 o'clock here.
Yeah, only 2 o'clock here. So let's get into some of these. I want to make sure that we answer the questions. So for larger shows, what have you seen as the best way to take questions from the audience in the regular chat or otherwise? And this is from Taylor.
Thanks, Taylor. That reminds me of another question we had talked about doing today, and that was like, what are some of my best experiences that I've witnessed personally? And Jill and I conceived of this strategy a month ago or so, where we decided we would go out to her fans and ask them particular questions, very pointed questions about stories, memories, and like memories relating to songs, or in her case, it was a particular album. So we Jill wanted to do a thematic album show, which was so good. And what we did is we got this beautiful, like, both of us were just crying. Like, it was just really emotional. We went through these emails and just like, oh my God, like marriages and deaths and children and travel, and oh man, just the reminder, you know, that music is the thing that binds us together experientially and locks memories like flavors in our soul. And so we pre-chose folks. And recently Dan and I did the same thing. We totally ripped off Jill's show. And Dan and I did the same thing with a recent show. And we had, gosh, Dan, how many? So we had probably what, like 10 or 12 people that we got to pre-select and feature. And we had probably like 20 people with qualified, beautiful shows. We knew were in the audience, willing to speak. And then we used the system, the engine in front of us right now with the raising of the hands and the interactivity based on intuition and time. Dan is very generous as a performer, and he spoke openly. His 15-minute after party turned into 45 minutes of conversation. I love that, and that's how you handle. That is one way you handle large shows. Just make it part of the invitation that goes into the front end of the show, and you make sure not only do a bunch of people show up, but they show up, like they are there. They're not going because they may get a chance to talk to Jill Barber on live. You know, who gets to do that in a venue with in a bar with a stage or you know what I mean? Like that doesn't happen. Glorious. Anyway,
I wonder, Mark,
love that.
I just watched a really interesting panel today with some other platforms that are doing similar things to us with different motivations and processes. And one was talking about the power of speaking, like you say, one-on-one to an artist. And I wonder, like, this is the creative element that I love about this format now, is like, you know, you could probably use the breakout rooms to do a one-on-one if that was something that the artist wanted to do, like ahead of the show or after the show, or scheduling, or you could be the switcher between those things. Is that a possible thing, you think?
So thank you, Laura, for that beautiful segue. So I'm designing a show for Catherine McClellan. Really excited about it. It's coming up soon. And we're talking about doing 2 phases to the same show, right? In a similar way that Dan was talking about how eventually you could buy tickets for, you know, a multi-tier experience. Like the in-person ticket would be different than the virtual experience. Well, we can also do that in the virtual digital space. So with Catherine's show, we're going to open a room ahead of time as a sort of VIP version of the show. And then you get one-on-one time, and the groups can break out into breakout groups and come back in a beautiful kind of lightly curated experience before the show happens. Then it goes to kind of pre-show mode, and then, you know, it goes to some music and a slide, and everybody goes into the weight room, and then comes back later for the actual performance. So it's like, you know, it's like that thing where if you got the premium and ticket and you showed up an hour ahead of the thing, maybe you got a meet and greet. You got to go into the green room and meet the artist and have a conversation, and then you go back out to the bar, wait a little while, and everybody comes in, and then it's their show. And it's a very powerful way of doing this. So we're actually doing that right now. So yeah, the breakout rooms is a fabulous way that you could do that. And you can do breakout rooms one-on-one, right? I could take this entire group right now, 65 people still with us, and I could split it into whatever that is, 130 rooms. And you guys would all be in, no, it'd be 32 and a half rooms. Math is hard. So yeah, it's totally doable. All depends, again, though, it goes back to the need and the purpose and the motivations around the artist's vision for why they're doing this. If they want that type of experience, then we as the co-hosts and the process designers and moderator, we can facilitate that using this platform. Many won't want to do that, right? They just won't want to. That's also quite anxiety inducing for some. Like, whoa. Unscripted conversation with real strangers? Yikes. What are you talking about? So some will, and this will evolve, and there'll be some familiarity. And once you do it, I can guarantee, once you do one of these shows and you realize how engaging and lovely and warm and beautiful they can be, you'll want to do it again. It's great.
Yeah, I agree. You get over the fear for sure.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
One question Hillary asked a while back, I just want to address, and I think I can answer this because you did touch on this before, but she asked whether it'd be better if the co-host is actually the host on your account, of the show, and you suggested that's the best thing because then you can do all the buttons in the first place, right? And Sarah, is there more question? I know I think I'm now 30.
Can we pause there for a second? I want to tell a story that Dan and I experienced together. 2 months ago, when we were both exploring this together to figure out, could we do this? Is this really viable? I said, Dan, just make me a co-host on the next week's show. And he's like, cool. So I got an invitation to add me as a host, and they literally, Zoom, shame on them, used this confusing language. And and all that Dan did is he just added me to his account as a host. So I was like, okay. And I clicked this thing and a warning came up that I didn't really read super closely, I guess. And I accepted it. And all of a sudden I was a paid user on Dan's account, and it had eradicated, deleted, auto-refunded my entire pro account. It just went away. My whole Zoom reality vanished. And I had to literally start by creating a new account. So don't fall into that trap. Not everybody's as dorky as Dan and I. We figured it out and laughed about it afterwards, because what were we thinking? All you need to do is go into your settings, enable the co-host feature, and then I can, right? If anybody's watching right now, the participants, just as an example to show you. So one of our colleagues, Claudio, is in Amsterdam, by the way. Hi, Claudio. And he's a support person often on our shows. I'm just right now going to make him a co-host. Boom. Claudio now in Amsterdam can run this show. If we bailed, Lauren and Sarah and I were incapacitated, he can run the show. He can administer this, which is the beauty of this platform, right? I can just throw admin privileges to Claudio.
Yeah,
good question. Good question.
Yeah, I agree. Sarah, do you want to catch up on the queue of who's next?
Laura, I think you got the main ones that I was asking. There's been a couple questions about our 2 ticket tiers coming for in-person versus online shows, and split payouts to multiple artists that are on the same show, if that's something we'll be able to do in the future.
Short answer, yes. All I'm doing right now is hiring developers. It's a crazy race, and yes, designs are where it's happening. And thanks for being patient with us. It's coming. I think one thing I wanted to touch on, Mark, and Sarah, just jump in if there's a question that I'm going to miss here. But one thing I wanted to ask you is you've described a few, but most challenging and most favorite experiences.
Working with someone like Dan Mangan is really frustrating. He's so stubborn. I had to say that out loud because that's so ridiculous. Challenging. No, okay. I helped produce and was the main technical host, many hundreds of participants, charity fundraiser showcase review show with like 8 performers and some spoken word folks and a couple of speakers, and about 12 or 15 different videos that needed to be played at precisely certain times, at precisely these moments between performances and breaks and introductions. In that moment, I had 2 co-hosts, myself and another, so 3 actually, 3 of us, and 3 computer workstations, one with videos all local and lined up and ready to go, numbered and da-da-da-da. And we had rehearsed it, and what does it look like to switch from a performance to unmuting audience for applause, to live video feed on via screen share, back to this, back to that, and back to introductions. And that was complicated, and there were some technical glitches. One really weird thing that was bizarro, which is the kind of thing you start to pick up on once you really become a master of this, is stuff like, so I'm right now using wired headphones because it's just kind of bulletproof, but I have a pair of those, those AirPods. Okay, so AirPods are Bluetooth. That's not a big deal. You connect it with your Bluetooth with your laptop. I'm on a Macintosh, it's a no-brainer. You turn them on, you put them in your ears, and you set the speakers just like you could with microphone and video and speaker in the left bottom corner as the speaker output device, and I could hear everything, no problem. So what I didn't know was, and I had, there were two of us doing this co-hosting duty, when one spoke to the other and said, get ready to play video 3, if I took the earbud out of my ear, those of you who have earbuds may already guess what happened. If media is playing, your iPhone's playing a song, you're playing a video, what happens when you take your earbud out of your ear? It sends a signal. It assumes that you want to stop playing whatever you're playing, and it just stopped the video. And then we were like, what's going on? Panicking, getting it playing again. Good, great. Then somebody would say something. What's that now? Really embarrassing. So those are the kind of little things. The thing that I would say, though, to not freak anybody out is, so what? Go with it. Be flawsome. Own the fact that we're all bumbling along, doing the best we can. And you just do what you can do. I've had much worse than we had today. I have seen pornography pop up in a screen share, whoop, and that is terrible. Occasionally, folks will sort of hijack the chat and start posting their own self-promotions and these sort of things. And you just deal with it. You talk to that person. You put them in the weight room if you need to, and you can talk to people in the weight room and say, we're not going to allow that. Can you please stop promoting your events or what have you, and then let them back in, or don't, or you can remove them. So, the standard thing, though, of course, is, oh gosh, my internet went out. And so one of the things that I like to do is to make sure that we have a conversation. What happens if your internet goes down? Can we flip to your phone as a backup? Can we, I literally was doing a show, a musician was coming on to a show as a guest musician. I had brought her an external mic, an external camera, a length of Ethernet, and she was plugging in right before the show, plugging in the Ethernet into her modem to avoid using Wi-Fi, dropped the modem on the ground, boom, no internet. So we coached her in that anxiety and riddled moment to use, I think on iPhone it's called, what's it called again? Where you share, you use personal hotspot, and then we got back up personal hotspot. So things happen.
And it's also a great point too, when you have co-hosts, they can hold the meeting.
Yep.
If you go down. So if
you say, yeah, you take it, Laura, take it. Yeah, exactly. Or Dan goes, I have to go pee. And you're like, ah!
Exactly. Bobby asked if there's a specific way to delete comments in the Zoom chat. I don't think there is.
No.
Because you don't want to remove them, but you're like, yeah.
Yeah, one thing that I had mentioned earlier is that as people join the meeting, they only get to see chat from that moment forward. As the host, I get a comprehensive download of all the chat, and it's saved when you record a session. And that's a really great thing to give to the artist, because in the moment they're being the performer. Hours later, they can read the chat and realize, often in my experience, has been what a profound impact they've had in a positive way they've had on people, and by way of that experience. And so the chat can be powerful, but I do think that of all of the beautiful features that Zoom affords us, their chat functionality is pretty limited. I would like to be able to do replies and threads, and if it was more like Slack than this rudimentary chat, I would be thrilled. But
and Dan, I've been talking to a lot of folks who have streaming platforms, and talking about white labeling streaming platforms, and we've talked about building streaming platforms. That seems like a very gargantuan task to take on. But
they've done a really good job.
And the thing is that there's lots of things that we want to happen, and we want it now, because we grew up in the age of Google and Apple, where design and technology is immediate and amazing, and quality is assured because they have thousands of people who are developing it. But there is a level of patience needed in terms of like what we can do with the current mediums.
Totally.
And so what our job is right now as co-founders of this company is to go out and find the best options for you. And then we'll bring them to you as vendors in the streaming, the place where you choose your streaming platform. That's where you can decide what you want to do. I wanted to just check and see, Sarah, is there more questions that we were missing?
One just came in. Is there a smooth way to transition from unmuting the audience for applause and then potentially muting them again? And when the host and artist are interacting, or when the artist is ready to play again?
I hate it.
I hate it. Yeah, Laura hates it. I have a love-hate relationship with it. No, so right now, if I clicked unmute and said, let's do applause. So typically, here's what I would do. So an artist is finishing a song, and normally what ends up being the thing, although I've had a couple say, no, I want applause every single song. I'm like, really, do you though? I bet you after 3 songs, you're gonna be annoyed because it is cacophonous. But after 3 or 4 songs, what I'll do is I'll go into chat and I'll do something like this. And I'll warn everybody that the song is going to conclude, and then I'll unmute the whole works. I count to 3. I click mute all. I disable that button, that window that pops up saying, do you want people to be able to mute themselves? And then I quickly go to the artist and I unmute them. And it takes a couple of seconds. If you have, Dan and I had about 1,000 people on a performance recently. It took some seconds to mute. It took some time to quiet back down. The machine needed to think. And I was like, do we want to do that again? That was a lot. But there's no more elegant way to do it, unfortunately. Because I think what it's doing is Zoom is sending a signal to every single user's thing, and it mutes them one by one by one by one by one. And it can be quite hilarious, by the way. It can be absolutely hilarious what you hear. Like, what is that noise? It's really funny.
Another one just came in. Do you hand signal with the artists for such changes, or time remains cues, that kind of thing? Do you have any kind of signal to talk with artists?
Dan and I have a couple of cues we use. No, I'm just kidding. We don't. No, that's a great suggestion, actually. That is the first time I've even thought of that. That is a really good suggestion. Whoever asked the question.
Baseball. This is where baseball moves are going to come in.
Yeah, you're going long. Or, I have to pee.
That was from Eric.
Thank you, Eric. I'm stealing that. That's a good one.
We're just coming up just over 75 minutes here. I'm conscious of time, as our Irish friend James used to say all the time. I want to make sure that we don't keep people and get Zoom exhaustion here. Let's have a couple last few words if we can, and then I would invite everyone to watch the YouTube version of this. We are also going to produce a document with some notes on this, and you can always talk to us and ask us questions through the support channel. But yeah, I love the idea that we're going to.
Shall I do a really rapid kind of tips, whip through some things for people to think about, or should we leave that for our?
If you can do it in like 3 minutes.
Oh,
without overwhelming.
I can do it in 90 seconds. Do not skip the tutorials on SideDoor. They're crucial, and they're going to improve over time. Never forget that you are not the performer. Stay behind and in solidarity with the artist, and make sure that they are everything. Don't skip tech check. Trust me, just don't. Really work to make sure that the technology they're using is going to work from their end. Think about ways to start a show strong and end a show with a gift. That's a great process design principle that I think everybody can benefit from. Watch your spotlight video. I sometimes will get so involved in all of the tasks, if I'm the only co-host, that I'll leave someone's spotlight that we had for a second, and the artist is talking, but everybody's staring at this person. Don't do that. If you're going to be recording video, know who's recording video. Consider both recording video. Keep in mind that the host view looks a little bit different as they fly through the various things they're doing than, say, if somebody on the other end, the artist, was recording video locally. With speaker view, it'll be more curated. So keep that. And what are you going to do with it? And if you're going to record video, make sure that you tell everybody, by the way, we're recording video, which I don't think we did today. So if you were featured or highlighted, we didn't spotlight anybody's video, that would have been a problem. But just to protect, respect their privacy and gain their consent, do you want to do screen captures? That can be a really beautiful asset later of a memory from the moment. Don't skip the run of show. I know that not everybody's going to agree with me on this, but for me, have a plan, even if you don't use a plan. I like to over prepare and then wing it if you have to. Don't use Wi-Fi. We talked about it before. I know that we're back to the day when we're running Ethernet cable to my computer. Yes, you are. Do that. If you're going to do this, do that. Also, here's a trick. Reboot your computer before the show with enough time in case anything goes weird. Don't update any software the day before the show. Good Lord. Just, if everything's working, leave it alone. Reboot. Leave everything you don't need on off, including disable things like Google Drive and Dropbox Sync and all of those things that can be resource heavy. Turn those off for a minute. And also I recommend finding your modem and unplug it, wait 30 seconds, plug it back in. Trust me, that does something during that reboot that will give you faster, more consistent uptime with your internet connection. Zoom fatigue is very real. It takes longer to go through material than it did in real life, but it seems to go faster, but it's more exhausting. It's a strange relationship with time. Don't go past 2 hours. Good Lord. 90 minutes is a solid, and if you do, give them breaks. Again, I just want to reinforce that humility and service is the underlying principles of this role, in my opinion. And to remember that our role is to honor these artists and their art. And we don't need more performances. We need better performances in this space. So help them, help these incredible members of our society create moments that count. So that's my top of mind tips and tricks, final word.
I love that. That's great. What a great way to end. And I wholeheartedly agree. One little tip here, if you want to save the chat, you can do that by hitting the 3 buttons at the bottom of the chat right now. It'll save the chat.
Only if the host enabled that permission in the settings.
I think I did.
If they did, it's allowed.
We're going to repost. We're going to put, as we did with the last YouTube webinar, we'll post the relevant links in that YouTube description along with some marks of what we were talking about. So, hey, this was fun.
Hey, wow,
and we had a Zoom bomber. We're so popular.
I'm so excited we had that. And it was a Russian Zoom bomber.
It's a Russian
F
Zoom
you
bomber.
Americans. I'm like, we're not Americans.
Oh, it's all good. Thanks, Sarah, for jumping in. Thanks, Dan, for being there. Thanks, Jill, for doing a little check-in with us. And I love seeing your faces always.
I know, it's like we're all in the same room. I love it.
Yeah.
We're a team.
So,
here we are in the room.
I know. We're gonna have a really big party at the end of this.
Oh gosh.
So we'll sign off. Thanks everyone, and tune into the YouTube link later, and we'll see you at the other shows. Take care.
Thanks everybody.
Bye.